Okay. Hi everyone, my name's Martin. I'm a front-end web developer, and I'm also one of the mentors that assist FEDSA with its mentoring sessions. This is going to be a continuation of our last session, which was based on React. And before I continue, I just want to mention that our sessions are sponsored by Code Capsules, which is sort of like the equivalent of Netlify, but for South Africans. I highly suggest checking them out and trying to host your sites with them and just seeing that page load speed. It's incredibly fast. Okay, so let's continue. You should all be able to see my screen. Can I just get confirmation from someone that you can see my screen?
Can see, yep.
Okay, great. Right, okay, so we're going to continue where we left off with React. People weren't able to join last week because we had load shedding and it was just a giant mess. But basically what we covered was sort of what React is, and then we just sort of looked at props, okay? Okay, so we're going to continue from there. On my screen at the moment, you can see that I've got a variable here, which is called books. And it's meant to be, it's just basically an array with different books. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go and map out this data so that it gets displayed on the screen. Please let me know if I'm moving a little bit too fast. I just want to make sure that I get all the content in. Okay, so the magic in React is that we can go and loop through content and code something once, and then our data gets sort of used as like in a loop, and then it just goes and recreates those things over and over and over. So as an example here, let's just actually use the example here. So you can see that I've got this books variable here. I'm trying to think of the easiest way that I can make it so that you can see everything at once. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just split it to the, no, I can't split it to the right. I'll split it down. So I've actually got the same file open now, just so that you can see the data and then you can actually see what we're doing here. Okay, so now you can also see what the data is doing. Okay, so in React, like we discussed last time, if you were to just go and write code, like let's just say for each or whatever, let's just say for let r, and then save it, you'll see that it's actually just rendering our text. It's not going to interpret it as code. Sorry, I'm just zooming in there. It's not going to interpret it as code. So like when we do template strings, if you can remember, we've got a template string. So const string is equal to, and then we use the backticks, and then we say, this is my, and then we'd have a name variable here. So you know that when we've got string templates, or string literals, I believe that was called, we use these braces like this. So same with React. We don't use the $sign, but we use the curly braces. Let me zoom in a little bit further. And then inside this, React is now going to go and interpret it as code. So now you can see that immediately my code is actually, it's been syntax highlighted. So I'm just going to say test, and save it. And then you can see there's test over there. Okay. So what we're going to do now, actually before I go and do this, I'll show you why we would go and do this. If I wanted to go and have all of this data displayed in a card, I would need to have, I've actually created a card element here, so I don't have to waste your time. And I'm just going to go to the top and import it. So import card from, this is card/card. Okay, so that's just breaking because of that. So let's save it. Okay, 100%. Okay, so now if I wanted to go and display multiple cards, so actually, let me just populate this first. Then there's something missing from here. Okay, so over here on the right is a card that I've already pre-styled before this. And what it takes is a title and it takes a description. And then it prints out the title here and it prints out the description. And I can also include an image, and the image is going to load over here. So now, usually what will happen before you've got to React and just normal HTML is you would go and you would statically code this into your HTML file. Okay, so you write this and then you would have to write the next card. So let's just say this is going to be book 2 and then this will be book 3. Sorry, that's book 3. Book 4. Okay, so I save it. And now what's happening is I've got these books hard-coded here. So there's the first book, then there's the second book. Let me just take out these spaces. Yeah, these aren't supposed to be it. Okay, so we've got the first book, then we've got the second book, we've got the third book, and we've got the fourth book. So this is how people usually go and code their HTML, is they go and they statically write this in or hard code it. But then what if there is a million books? You're going to have to go and you're going to have to write this a million times. And that's just crazy, right? And then what if I say to you, look, now I want all of these titles to be one number further. So this must be incremented by 1, and that one must be incremented, and these must be incremented. There's a lot of maintenance that's going to take place here. And then for however complex this is, that's just going to make it, whatever maintenance, become even more complex. So this isn't how we really want to be dealing with data. You know, like someone's going to go and say these books need to be changed, and we need to come in and we need to manually change it. So this is not how we want to do it. Instead, what we want to do is we want to loop through our data, which we've got it hard coded here, but this would actually come from an API. So we'd actually want to loop through that data and then display one of these cards per item that's in our data. Okay, so the way we do that is actually quite simple, and it's the reason why we covered these methods, is that we use the map method. Now, if you can remember, you got the array method, and that maps a one-to-one. So if we had a list of books like this, and we would have just mapped them out and returned them, we would actually get an array that's exactly the same as this. That's sort of how map works, is that it just maps like a one-to-one. In React, that really, really helps us, because we can actually map out our data and then render out HTML or an element based on that data. So let's look at how we can actually do that. So at the top here, I've got that books. It's just called books, and I'm going to say books.map. I'm going to open it, and then if you can't remember how array methods work, the first item is the first element. Sorry, the first parameter is the element that's being dealt with from this array. So book over here is going to be each book for each time it loops. Okay, so we've got book there, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to return a div, and we're going to say hello, and then close that div. Whoops. Okay, just save it. Okay, so at the top of the screen here, I'm just going to have to zoom in. Yeah, you can see we've actually got hello, 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 hello. Actually, what I'll do is I'll actually throw an ID in here, so an index. So with our array methods, the first element, apart from reduce, is usually going to be each element in the array. It's the element that's currently being dealt with. And then the next parameter is usually your index. So what I'm actually just going to change this to is I'm actually going to change it to, whoa, what happened there? Sorry about that. It's quite disorientating on my screen because everything is super, super big. Okay, so I'm going to go and change it to index. Sorry, and save it. Okay, so now it's going through each item here, and it's rendering the next number. The reason why it's sort of grouped together like this is because I've actually got styling on the card. Let's actually take that out. I'll actually duplicate this whole thing. We'll come back to it. Then at least it's going to look how it's supposed to look. It's just so that I don't have to style it and waste your time. Okay, so now this is how it usually will look. So we're looping through this array, and we're printing out the index for each item. Okay, so we're halfway there. We're looping through these books, and we can now access this data with this book variable here. So what I'm going to say is I'm actually going to change this to book title, because I know from the shape here that we're going to have a title, and we'll probably also have a description. Okay, so I'm going to save it. And there you go. So now we've actually got our book titles. Unfortunately, you can't see it's a bit of a mess. But so there's 4 books that are now actually getting rendered out here. Okay, so if we were to go and create a whole brand new book here, and let's just call it like nonsense. It's nonsense. And save it. There we go. So here's our other book here that's now being added on. So if this was coming from an API and someone was working on a database, they go and they update the database. And whenever our page loads, it's going to go, as long as we've done our API call, we're going to go and we actually get this updated information. Okay, so that is incredibly powerful. Like that's sort of like the big thing about React, at least to me anyways, is being able to have this data and then to loop through it and for it to generate just this one line of code. Well, with just this one line of code over here, I guess it is 3 lines of code, we're now able to loop through all of our content and display it. Okay, so here we are looping over our books. Now, before I go and I start changing it to a card, I want to discuss the key property. So in our last session, I touched towards the end on the virtual DOM, and basically what that is React takes a snapshot of your code, and then when something else changes, like for example, there's a new sort of element that's been added, it does a comparison called a diff between that old snapshot and the new snapshot, and then it sees what is different, and then whatever is different, it then goes and adds just that part of HTML into your actual DOM. So by doing that, just having basically JavaScript objects for comparison, it ends up being a lot faster than if I try to actually do a proper DOM comparison against another DOM. Okay, so when it actually does that, let me just go and get to the HTML here. Okay, so here is the items here. Now when React renders these items out, let's actually make it big just for this part. When React renders out these items here, it needs to keep track internally, not on this page here, but internally, which item is which. It basically has to have an ID for each thing. Because what if we were to move this one on top of that one? React's going to need to know that. So how is React going to know that we moved this one on top of this one? So that whenever there's a state change or something, that it knows that this one is up here instead of down there. And the way that works is it uses something called a key. Whenever we're mapping out content like this, the parent, the very outmost parent, needs to have a key value to it. And this key needs to be a completely unique value. So for this one, let's just say it had a unique key of 0, then 1, then 2, and then 4. And the reason why that is that if I was to move this element here, not here actually in the page, but programmatically, if I was to move that element, it would know that this is actually index 1, not index 0. And that's incredibly important for React. Okay. Now, what you often see people doing is that when they have the key, they just put their index in from the array and they call it a day. Done. Now, that's not actually how it's actually supposed to work. Everybody does this, and actually, let me take it out and I'll show you what actually happens. So if I take out this index here, and then I save it. Sorry, let me just refresh the page. So you can see there's the warning here. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So it's saying this div over here needs to have a unique key prop. So if I go and I put the key is equal to index and I save, can you see the error message is gone? Now people call it, oh, okay, I did the job. Nope, you're not done. This is not right. And I wish React would actually do something about it. I stand to be corrected, but I've been told that React actually already does this internally. It tries to use your index that you get from the array method as sort of like a fallback. But then a user will come on and they'll actually go and they'll put this key equals index, and then the error message goes away and they think, okay, I've done my job. No, that's not correct. This is not actually a unique value. I'm not going to go into all of that, but basically the rule is don't ever use the index as your key. Ever, 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 ever. It must just sort of be a rule of thumb. Tamira?
So I have a question about that, because what I do is I know that I can't use just the plain index, but I really have no other way of like counting my items, or they don't necessarily have their own unique ID.
Yeah.
So what I sometimes do is I then write as key book plus index. So like the string book plus the index, or plus like dash plus index, so that it's book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. And I don't know if that's
that's not going to work. It's not going to work, because if you were then to change the ordering of your array here, basically you still got the index actually being the wrong value, even though you're trying to combine it to your title. And I used to do the exact same thing. And look, I do stand to be corrected, but from my understanding, from what I've learned when I was studying it, is that it's not going to matter, because you've still got this index, and that's always going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But maybe it might have actually had to have been 1, 0, 2, 3, 4. So let me just see Douglas's question, and then I'm actually going to answer it in more detail when.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Douglas.
Yeah. Now that's also something that I normally do, and I didn't realize that. Must I rather use an npm package to insert in instead? Because if you use, I think it's called UUID.
No, don't. No, I know what you mean. Like, yeah, you can, but I'll show you an easier way that we can basically do this. So before I continue, I just want to mention to everybody else, because not everybody's as advanced as you two. So what they're asking is that why can't we use this index? And what if I was to combine like a string? So say like hello world and then plus the index. And then you get hello world 0, hello world 1. But then the problem is that this index is still going to be not actually allocating the RDs. Okay, so the two things to solve this is the first one would be to find a unique RD. And like Tamira was saying, oh, what happens if I don't have a unique RD? So in this case, when I created this data, I purposely included an RD here, okay? So that would be the first way to do it, is that if you've got any control of the data, make sure it's coming through with an RD. Your data should always have an RD. If it's coming from a database, it's going to have an RD. Speak to your backend and say to them, guys, come on, sorry, can you please just give me some RDs, send them through, send them always. So that's the one way, is check for an RD. Sometimes it doesn't have to be an RD. For example, if you've got a list of books, right, which we do have here, how often is your book going to be exactly the same? Obviously, in the case of books, yeah, you're going to have that because you'll have first edition, second edition, third edition, etc., etc. So in this case, a title's probably not going to work. But let's say if it's somebody's, I don't know, what's the name of something that's really unique. Maybe scientific flower names. There you're probably going to have always unique RDs. So that's the easy way. Is that so we would know that we've got an RD. So what do we do over here? Is we go to key is equal to book.rd. So it's now using this RD here, right? And I'll save it, and we're going to have no error message. But now what happens if we don't have an RD? And the solution is I'm not so fond of it, but Ken C. Dodds, who's got the Epic React course, it's an amazing course. It's just really steep. I think it's like $5,000 or something. If by the way, if you can get your work to sponsor it, definitely do so. Like, that is the React course to do. He goes from beginning to end, and he shows you everything from the ground up. What he says to do, and so therefore I'm going to take it as gospel, is he says to create a method. And basically what that's going to do is it's just going to loop through your data and add your own little RD onto it. So something like const add RD to data, and then your data comes in. Sorry, let me actually do it like a normal function so that it's not foreign to some people. Okay, so we'd get our data in, and then we will return this data, but plus an RD like we've got here. Okay, I don't really want to go and code the whole thing out, and then it's sort of confusing other people. But basically, what it's going to happen is that you're going to go and you're going to map out the same thing, and you're just going to take your data and you're going to add something like this, RD0, from that actual index that you'll get from this map. Let me just do it anyways. Okay, so we go return data.map, and then item, and what we will return here is item, and then we will say something like RD. Sorry, so we go with RD is index. Okay, so the code's 100%, but so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be mapping through your data, and then you will just go and spread out your actual object, and then you'll add an RD based on this index here. And so Tamira, this is sort of what you were saying here. Can you use the index and add it on? So this is not the same case. This is actually going to map your data out correctly. And so according to Ken C. Dodds, that's what he recommends that a person does, is you have your little function like that, and then you only have to create it once. Say you go and you add this to shared or whatever, and then you just got to map through the stuff each time you actually want to render out your code without an RD. Yeah, Douglas.
I just got one question coming back to that. Is that now only wise if you're not drawing from a database? Because if you're drawing from a database, then obviously there's a unique code that you can use. So if you're not drawing from a database, you use that method rather.
Yeah. So basically, if your data doesn't have a unique RD, then what he suggests is you just map out, you just add an RD on, and according to him, it's not going to slow your app down or anything of the sort. But like you said, so if it's coming from a database, there typically is an RD of some sort or something that identifies each thing uniquely. But if you don't have access to unique RDs, then what you can do is you can have a method like I showed you that just goes and maps through your data and adds adds that index on.
I've just got one other question. Now, if we add a key there of index, will it actually slow your app down? What actually happens in the background that we're not supposed to do that sort of method?
Okay, so, sorry, that's not correct. So, let me just try and style this very quickly. Let's see what I can do here. Well, just before we actually continue, let me just go mention that when you're trying to style stuff, React and doing inline styling, you've got to have the double braces like this. And then I'm just going to say margin. And then normally when we've got CSS methods, you'll see that they are usually like margin bottom is snake case. Whereas with React, we turn it into camel case, so margin bottom. And then the second part, you're going to go and you're going to put it as a string. So that should technically, actually, wait, I added it the wrong place. Sorry about that. So to make it so that it's a little bit more easier to understand what's going on here. Okay, so I've just added the margin on here. Okay, so here is where the problem comes in. Okay, the first thing is that you asked about, does it actually make the app function slower? I believe it does. I believe that it can actually add a significant amount of extra rendering time on all of that if you are using index. Now, what they will usually say is, just give me a second. What they usually say is, if your content is never going to change order, then the index is fine. Because it's never ever going to change order. So for React, it's not really going to matter at the end of the day. But I feel like that ends up going down a slippery slope, and then you wonder, should I use index? Should I not use index? Like, I feel that's better just having the rule that you should never be using index.
Rather safe than sorry, basically.
Yeah, because what happens if someone else comes along now and then you decide to add filtering and sorting to your list? So you, to me at least, you're creating technical debt. It's not just my opinion though. The stuff that I'm saying is based on the stuff that I've been learning from Ken C. Dodds and some other React courses like from Wes Boss. So let me just see what Tamira's question is.
Yeah, so I understood what you meant with to create a separate method to add your own ID to your object. But so do you just do all of that before you start, I guess, using the data in your map, in your component?
You would actually you'd use it like this. You would do something like add ID, and then the return of this is basically just books with your ID added onto it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so it's actually quite straightforward. And when he said it, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. Whenever I'm missing an ID, I need to go and run my stuff through another function. But I think you end up when it's using the index like this, you're actually you're slowing down the app to the extent that it's just always going to be better to be adding your own ID if one doesn't exist. And also, as far as I understand, it's better than when for example, you're bringing a library in. Like Douglas mentioned, the UUID library. There was a project I worked with in the States with this app generator, and there was a developer there, and they threw these random IDs into everything, and eventually at some points there were some conflicts, and it just started becoming a mess. If you're trying to be a really good front-end developer, and basically, let's say we're releasing this and it's a shop, trying to get your payload size down to as fast as possible is incredibly important. That something like 0.02 seconds could actually cost that company hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm not joking. It can cost them a lot of money. Just the slightest bit of delay. There's even things like if this title is red or if it's black, that can lead to difference in conversions. So you'll be surprised at how much a difference makes. So when it is about trying to optimize your page as quick as possible to make them as much money as possible, you don't want extra libraries in there. You don't want things that are like adding UIDs. You rather just have your own method that's going to do it. And I can promise you now, if you are trying to like just be as good as you can, and you get to that optimization point, you're going to rip out every library possible. You're not going to want to have any libraries other than most likely the library you're using to style. Not even Axios. You just rather strip it down to fetch. And so in those cases, you're trying to cut as much size out as possible. So I recommend rather going with that method I showed you, or using a unique ID instead of importing a library, because today you're going to use a library for that, then you're going to use a library for this, and you're going to use a library for that, and then eventually you're not going to ever get down to that 99 page speed index. Okay, so let's continue where we left off, and it was about rendering these items out and why it becomes problematic. Okay, so React has rendered these items out here, right? And where the problem comes in is that if these reorder, so let's say I was to delete this one and it gets deleted, how does React know that it was element? Sorry, we had 0, then we had 1. Actually, wait, let's do this. Just give me a second. A lot of people don't take this seriously, and then their apps tend to have a lot of problems, and it slows down drastically as well. Okay, so yeah, we've got I've put these values here: 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, so you can see the index. So now, if I was to go and delete this one over here, how is React going to know that that one was actually deleted? It basically can't. It doesn't know how to do that unless it's actually got this index to actually keep track of it. And if you're using this index here, it's still just going to map out a 0, 1, 2, 3. It's not actually going to be 0, 2, 3, 4 like I've got here. Okay, so I've got 0, 2, 3, and 4. If it was using this index, it would still see it as 0, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't know that that one index was actually deleted. I'm sorry, I should have actually gone and showed you or bought you an app where you can actually see it. Where the problem tends to come in now is that usually when you're trying to reorder things, and React can't actually correctly reorder it, and then it spends a whole bunch of time trying to render and figure things out, and then it actually does slow down your app. But so this is where that problem comes in, is that it can't keep track of what's actually on the screen if it doesn't have unique indexes. Okay. Any other questions related to that? Is it still unclear, or I hope I have cleared it up? Yeah, Douglas.
Yes, I've got one more question. When you're designing something like this, must you limit as much use pure JavaScript as much as possible without having the use of actual libraries that you're installing? Will it slow your app down quite a lot if you install too many libraries?
Oh man, yeah, you will actually. I don't know how much you know about games, but like you get on like a lot of games, you get that min maxing, and that basically means that if say you're doing Dungeons and Dragons, you try and create your character to be as strong as possible. Then in games like, I don't know, like MMORPGs like World of Warcraft or whatever, you try and make your character the best you can make it, and you can only ever get those results if you sort of really making these min max decisions. Now your React app is going to be the same thing. It's when you are trying to get 90% and higher on the Google PageSpeed Index, you're not going to be able to do it if you've just got libraries upon libraries upon libraries. It's just not going to be possible. Your JavaScript payload is too big. If I remember correctly, the payload for everything on a web app needs to be something like 250 kilobytes in total for everything. Then you're actually looking at libraries that each of them are like, what, 50 kilobytes or whatever the case. Yeah, so if you do add too many libraries, you'll never actually be able to optimize your page correctly. You're going to have to start stripping things out. And sometimes there's bad decisions made. Like, it's almost every single project that I've worked in, there's always someone that comes along and they're trying to add Bootstrap, and then someone else comes along and they want to add Material UI. It's not actually really that bad. Usually it's this Bootstrap that's been added, and then you've got someone else who's trying to use styled components. Now you've got two libraries that are doing the same thing, and you just can't. You're not going to get to those like 95 plus. And like I've said, like 0.2 seconds is lost sales. They're losing conversions. So yes, when you want to try and build your stuff as lean as possible.
There's just one other question. Is there an extension that you can use to check how efficient or how fast your page loads? Like, I know you're talking about getting it to that 95 or whatever. Is there an extension that you can use to actually test that?
No, not the way that I think you think. Look, in Chrome, you've got built-in Lighthouse, which can go and sort of audit your page. Then you've got the page speed index, which is, I think it's running Lighthouse anyways, but it's not on your own computer. You don't want to test it on your computer. You want to test it on Lighthouse so that they've got like a, I don't know what to, sort of, everything's been leveled out. I don't, as far as I know, I don't think there's something that you can just like get like as a library and you run it through your code and it checks it for you. I don't think it works like that. It becomes quite an art form to try and figure these things out and see how you can improve. There's it's like a certain a bunch of steps that you follow. Like I would say the first one is you look at your images. Are your images too big? And if they're too big, then you want to use a next gen format like WebP, even AVIF if it gets supported by that browser, and then you fall back to each one after that. And then you learn to reduce your JavaScript, which means removing all the libraries. There's certain tricks. So I think we're probably gonna have to actually have a whole separate series on that about page optimization. But as far as I know, there isn't something you could just sort of get and you can download. The one thing I can mention, and I tend to disable it because it tends to make my VS Code really slow, is there is that one extension, and I actually do highly recommend getting this one. Actually, I do actually recommend this one, because so that you can at least get a sense for how big these things are going to be. There is that one extension, and what it does is it shows the size of the import cost. Okay, so it's this over here. You can see 1.3 million. I do actually recommend getting this one just for a while, and then eventually you can turn it off. I'll go and I'll post this in the FEDSA mentoring sessions when we're done. So I'll enable it so that you can actually see what actually happens here. Okay, so you can see here, it's actually showing the size of the library that I'm using. And when you eventually got 50 libraries or 10 libraries, 50 is too many, by the way, but if you eventually got like 10 libraries here, and then you start seeing these things add up, then you eventually like, I don't know, do we really need Bootstrap? Do we really have to use Bootstrap? Can we not get away with just CSS? And if we're talking hundreds of thousands of rands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is millions of rands, then you're going to find that you're very quick to remove these things. You don't actually need to have them. But I think optimization should be something that we sort of tackle. Part of the short courses that I'm planning on building, the one is like a really bad React website, and you have to try and optimize it. So don't worry, we are planning on getting to that in the future.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so that was the index and any issues that might be appearing there. Okay, so if you can remember, what we've got here is this books array, and we map over the books array, and for each of those items that are in that array, we render out this div. And we substitute the values with what's from our array. So this is basically like dynamic content. You're applying a data source, and it's looping over that data source and generating these elements for you. So now let's actually step it up. Instead of having this div here, I've actually got a books component. Let's actually go look at the book component first. Oh, sorry, it's a card. So here is a card component. But the point is that, the purpose of this component is that you pass in a title, a description, and an image into its props, and then it's going to render out a card. So I'll go and I'll just put this at the bottom here so that we can keep our eyes on it. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to render out these cards here. So I'm going to say card. Did I import it? Yeah, there it is. Okay. And I'm going to say title is book.title. Description is book.description. And then image is equal to book.image. Let's save it. Okay. So let me just fix the screen here. Right. So what's happening now is we're looping through these books. And each time it's looping, we're taking this element and its values, and we're passing it into our card. And so it loops through that whole list. So let's just have a look at our books at the bottom here, so we can just see the data. So we go to the first book in our list, and then we're passing in the title and the description and the image. And then we go to the next item. This now becomes book, and then we put the data in, so on and so on. But now we don't have a key, so we're going to say key is book.id, and we're going to save it. So let's go and see if we're throwing any errors. You should always have your terminal open like this. I didn't have it now, and that's bad. You should always have this visible so that you can see exactly what's happening. And then mine's also persisting, so it does show. Oh, it's not persisting. Never mind. Okay, so what's happening now is it renders through each of these items, and for each one, it then goes and displays a book. And I've just basic pre-styling to just, make the button sort of clickable. Let's get the right size here. Okay, so this is now basically rendering out your content from that array, and it's one of probably the biggest building blocks when it comes to React. So now I just want to just go to a bit of an advanced step here. We have discussed destructuring in the past. So what is destructuring? It's basically if we've got, for example, if we got this element here, let me actually go and do this. If we were to say book const book 0 is equal to this. Okay, so we've got this book here. This book 0. Now, if I wanted to get title out of book 0, instead of going title is equal to book 0 dot title, what we can do is we can destructure. So you open your brackets, squiggly braces, curly braces, and then you equal it to the object. Then inside, it's almost like a bag. We can go and say we want this in our bag, we want this in our bag, we want this in our bag. So that's what we're going to do here. Now I'm actually going to push Control Spacebar and learn that one. Like you want to use Control Spacebar all the time, and that's going to pop open your IntelliSense. And over here, if it's got a blue square like this, then heck yeah, that's 100%. You can go and this exists in your object if you see it with like a blue boarding block like this. Let's see if it actually shows any information. So it's just basically if I pop that open, it tells me what that property is. Okay, so in here, I actually want to get all of these properties. So I'm going to say title, then description, and ID, and image. Okay, so that's now destructured these values from this book 0. We don't have to go and say const title is book 0.title, const description is book title.description. We just go and destructure it like that, right? Now, we have covered destructuring before, but now I want to show you how you can destructure in here. Remember, we've got this book 0, right? Or books here. So we could actually take this and put it over here. Okay? And save it. Now I don't have to say book.id, book.title, book.description. I could just go and straight say title, description, image. Let's save it. And there we go. So, sorry, let's just actually clean up a little bit here. Okay, so now that is exactly the same as it was before, except we weren't doing book.title, book.description, and book of all, all the stuff we were doing. So, to me, this is far more cleaner. There's a thing about React, and it's one of the reasons why I actually love it, is that it teaches you to be really good with JavaScript. So I know for some of you, maybe all of you, maybe none of you, you look at destructuring like this, and you're like, oh, I just don't want to learn that. It's so foreign or something. When you start playing around with React, I promise you're going to learn this stuff, just because it just makes things so much easier. Yes, Douglas.
I've got a question concerning that. What happens if you've got too many items within your array? I mean, if you've got like 10 or say about 5 or 10 in there, would you do it like that, or would you go before it and destructure it? Or doesn't it really matter to how many items you have? Just rather destructure it like that?
Yeah, let's see. I've never really had a case where I had to use all of it. In that case, I'll tell you what I would. This is something I actually thought about not so long ago.
Because then it becomes very long and lengthy.
No, and it looks gross.
Difficult to read.
Yeah, look, in that case, this is something I actually thought about just the other day. In that case, then your component, what you probably want to have, like what you're basically saying is that this component is going to actually end up having like 50 different fields like this.
Yeah.
So instead, what you should then do, instead of passing individual fields, what you should probably do in this case is that you pass the entire object to it. So you're going to say book is equal to book. and you're not going to deal with any of this. You're just going to have the book.
And then you handle all that in the card component,
Yeah,
rather.
then then it's too many fields. Like this is for like a basic card where you're just going to be passing a title, a description, and an image. Like I've worked in ecom for about 2.5 years now, and I can tell you it's one thing that is always used everywhere, and it is actually quite magical how different one sort of thing can be. All these different things is a card component where you've got a title, a description, and an image. You will be amazed at how that is used for an author. Okay, it's used for a product. So just imagine you got the title, which is the author's name, then the author's bio. I'm a physician that deals with health products, and then see my profile, and you click the button. Then now look, here is a book, right? There's a title, there's a description, and there's this. Now in Codebases I've worked, I've been able to reuse a card component, and I actually personally refactored the code from all these different components to one card component, because you could then use the same card for a product. So over here will be your product name, product description, and then a buy now button. So sorry, no, I'm sort of going on a tangent there, but I just want to say that probably cards I've learned to like really appreciate the sort of the versatility that a card can provide. So in this case, like what you mentioned, you got all of those fields. Rather pass it through to your card, and then you're gonna have to deal with it inside of your card. Let's just go to the card here. You'd have to go and deal with it over here and basically get out all the stuff that you want. Whereas the card that what I was showing you now, you're using sort of those fields that you're always using, where you've just got the title, the description, and the image. Okay, I'm gonna take out the index there. Okay, so now we've actually back to our card here. Let's just refresh it. So this data then goes and is getting inserted into card. We didn't actually look at rendering. We looked at props. We didn't really look into great detail. So let's just cover this now. So I've got this card component that we've created. It's this card over here. And then we're passing in these values. Okay, ignore key. That is not for us. That's React doing its own thing, like metadata. So this is the title we're passing in. We're passing a description, and we're passing an image. Then that is now available in our props. And we can go and grab these values. And then inside here is where we actually go and put our data. And let's just look at sort of the biology of a card. You can see that we've got the card is the actual function, always uppercase. You should always be using Pascal case. If you're not sure what Pascal case is, just have a quick look here. Pascal case is where the first letter is capital, so it's like camel case, except the first letter is capital. I believe that you can also get, they call this upper camel case, I believe. Upper camel case. I can't remember, it's been a while. But your React components always, they need to have the Pascal case. Then your file name, same thing. You need to have a capital letter. And please use the .jsx extension. It is not required. It's not going to make your app function differently. But if you look at my code here, look at how books.js is this JavaScript icon. Let me zoom in just so that it's a bit more clearer. You can see it's a JavaScript icon. And then look at this cardless.jsx. Immediately I know that this is going to be a React component. And immediately I know with the lowercase and that icon, that's just going to be data. It's just going to be JavaScript. Now, a lot of places you're not going to have to call your files .jsx, but the point is that I'm trying to teach you sort of best practices. Then if you go to a place and they don't want to do it, that's fine. You have to learn to adapt to the place you're working. But at least then, if you are doing it sort of including all the steps, then you're going to have like, I don't know, a better coverage. Okay, so let me just go and clear out the mess that I've done here. So I went and I popped that stuff there. Okay, so we saved that. Okay, so we're rendering out our cards, and then here are our cards, and we render out this data here. Now, remember we got the props like the destructuring the values like this. We could do the exact same thing here again. So this is more of your advanced level. If you don't know how to do it yet, that's perfectly fine. But try and grow to get to this point. So we know that we want title, description, and image from props. So all we do is we just open up our curly braces and we say title, description, image. And there we go. We just delete that and save. Now, can you see how we've actually gone and reduced our lines of code here? To me, that's perfect. I love it. Like, I love reducing the stuff down to that. And then you can even actually start throwing in like your export functions over here. But I prefer the old school way of having your function here and then export default over there. Okay, so any other questions at this stage? Oh my word, it's already 10:02. I guess so. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up questions to everybody for the last 10 minutes. I don't think there's much use that I go into something in more detail. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have the time to go into detail as well as some questions. So if any of you have questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah.
I've got a question. When you're writing that object destructuring, will it ever affect your rendering times, or is it just to make cleaner code? Is that sort of what the whole aim of it is?
It's the aim is to make it a lot cleaner. Not just cleaner, far easier to maintain.
Okay.
And I'll show you why. Let's look at a very quick example here. Let's say we've got a product, right, and it's getting sold. So we're gonna have like an ID. We're gonna have a title. So I'm gonna try to rush this. Description is gonna just be description, and then price. Okay, so now if we're gonna go and get these, we're gonna destructure from here, and when we get all of these values here, we would go and actually I'm doing it the wrong way around. Let me just do it this, then I'll take it back. Okay. So if we wanted to usually get these values out of there, I'm gonna say ID is equal to product.id, and then I'm gonna go and duplicate this, and then by the way, just about workflow, like really important, have a shortcut to duplicate your line down. Look how quickly I'm just duplicating, and then make sure you've got a shortcut for find next selection. That's where you select text and it'll grab any sort of next one that is the exact same text, and you can make it work to match your case. So for example, if we turned this on match case, sorry, over here, match case, and I made this an I here, and I'm sorry, I know I am getting distracted, but I'm trying to always provide value for you all. If I was to try and then select it, because it's match case, it's not going to get the capital letter, but if I turn match off, then it will get it because of the capital letter. You need to try and work fast so that you get more done, and then you just feel really good as well. So I'm going to go and change it to title, and then change this to description, and then this one to price. Okay, now what happens if I've gone and I've actually renamed this to product 2? I need to now go to every single block of code here and to change all of this to product 2. Now let's say we had just this. We want to change it to product 2. I just go to the end and I add the 2 at the end. Like, this is just always, to me, is always going to be the better way of working. However, there is one sort of gonna catch you out moment. If some of these don't exist on an object, you might end up in a situation where it's throwing errors. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but that is the one disadvantage, is that you can have cases where data doesn't exist and you end up with errors. Whereas if you would have gone and set it like this, you would have just ended up with undefined. So basically the takeaway from that is that when you've got data coming from an API, you might not want to go and work with it like this, unless you got sort of like a lot of like error handling. This can actually be a topic that we can actually look at in the near future, that if we actually want to discuss it, sort of those sort of caveats and catching this stuff out. But so I would say, if you can, always destructure. There's actually something that a lot of people don't actually even know, which is I actually want to quickly discuss here. Now I know some of you won't know state yet. We're going to be doing state next week. Sorry, use state. I'm going to have to use React.useState here. So this is how you actually set state in React, and what state is basically it's keeping memory sort of a value for you, so that each time it's re-rendering, it maintains that value and it doesn't change it. Now, over here is actually when use state, when it's called, it actually sends back an array with 2 values, right? So use state is actually equal to something, let's just say 0 and 0. then what we're actually doing over here is actually destructuring. We're destructuring an array for us to select state as this first value and use state as the second value. Oh, whoopsie. Wasn't meant to do that. Let me just get that open quickly. So my point is there is that you actually are destructuring in React without even actually even knowing about it. For example, when you've got the use state, there you're actually destructuring an array, like I mentioned here. So that was just like a little bit of did you know information. I was hoping that this week I'd have time to go into state, but it's not going to be the case. We're going to have to look at state in the future. Just while I've got you all here, we're still building out like a bunch of short courses. I've just been quite a bit strapped for time. I'm gonna be building out a bunch of, like the last project. Basically, it's a short course. I'm calling it a short course, but it's exactly the same thing like we had last time, where there's this project you have to build out, but we're going to be doing like a feature branch workflow. So you're using Git, as well as sort of like tasks to make sure that it's, you've got like this work environment, and then possibly code reviews, so that you submit it, and then you actually have to have your code reviewed before you're actually allowed to merge your code. And then you'll be like locked out from merging unless your code gets reviewed. So we are building that out. Just please be a bit patient with us. I know it's going to still take some time, but basically what it's going to be, there's just going to be React courses, and one's going to be working on, like, for example, error handling. One is going to be doing like optimizing your page with SEO and getting rid of all the errors and get page load speed. Then one with sort of like Supabase or Firebase. So stay tuned. We're slowly working that out, and I'm just sorry, we all got jobs and that, so it's hard for us to spend all our time doing this. But it is coming, with hopefully the first course being done in the next month or 2 months.
I've got a question relating to that. Will there ever be a chance in the not so distant future where we almost work as a team?
Yes.
Because teamwork is obviously very important in programming.
Yeah, I'm very keen on that. And that's something we keep discussing. And basically the one thing I'm stuck on is that, should we have a hackathon or should we just have it as a normal FEDSA thing? Where, like, Tamira, she actually, just got to give a big shout out to her. They won the last hackathon, or maybe it wasn't even a last one, but they won, and they actually won a substantial amount of money, in my opinion. So we could possibly be looking at a hackathon, or I don't know if you all would rather just keep it sort of in-house as FEDSA. Yeah. So I guess I'll drop down a form at some point and just ask everybody for their opinion. But yes, Douglas, that is one of the things, is we would like to do a pair programming session. It's called pair programming. And it's just a question of whether we're going to have just like a short course and pair programming session, or should we actually look at something a bit bigger and do sort of a hackathon where you're coding for something, that's good for like maybe like a healthcare related thing, or Corona or something. Where basically you're coding for, what is the right term here? Not for charity, but you're coding to make the world a better place, so there's actually something behind all of it. It's not just some random project. There's sort of maybe benefiting some children or something of the sort.
Okay, sure.
Okay, all. This is going to be the end of the session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Next week, we're going to carry on with React, looking at states, and possibly, I'm hoping to fit styling in, but that might have to be its own session. Thank you very much. Really, really do appreciate you for joining us. I'm going to be hanging around after this, off the air, off the recording, so feel free to hang around if you've got anything you want to discuss, even personal questions, job interview, that kind of stuff. But for the rest of you that need to go, no worries, and I guess we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.